Hello, welcome to another edition of Core Thoughts. I'm Arjun, founder and CEO of Baton Systems. I have the pleasure here today to introduce to you David Ornstein, who's joined us as the Chief Operating Officer. David comes from Barclays. I've been working with David for some time. He's very well known in the VC circles and in startups. He comes not only from a banking experience, but also has been mentoring a few FinTech startups who are at a similar stage of their company life cycle that is growing from a startup to a scale-up mode. So today, first I want to introduce you. Welcome again.
Excellent. Thank you. Excited to be here.
Why don't you give the audience a little bit of your background, what you've done at Barclays as well as
Sure.
your other.
So I had the pleasure to be at Barclays for a long time, kind of in different modes. When we were building the investment bank from kind of a bit player is perhaps too harsh, but to a leading investment bank around the world, and a lot of the execution that we were doing in that. Then through the crisis, I ran the integration of the FIC businesses when we bought the U.S. Part of the former Lehman Brothers. And then I had the chance to run the regulatory change agenda for the investment bank globally for a number of years, including implementation of Dodd-Frank, MiFID, EMIR, the Volcker Act under Dodd-Frank, or the Volcker Rule, I should say, under Dodd-Frank, and so on. I stepped away a few years ago to kind of get more involved in earlier stage companies.
Awesome. So like they say in startups, you're always advised to hire people who are smarter than you. I'm lucky to be able to have work with people like David and Jerome and Alex, very senior people in the industry. So this has been a great period in the Baton life cycle. And we are at an important point in our juncture. So I've learned a lot from David over the past few months, having worked with him. One thing that is how he analyzes the problems of looking at a company that is in that inflection point of moving from a startup to a scale-up. Can you tell me, you worked with a few companies. Can you tell our audience, what are the patterns that you've seen? Where do companies have to deliberately make the transition from a startup to a scale-up?
Sure. So I think the most obvious thing, it comes, and it's something that comes advising. You come from a big organization to a young company, people are very concerned that you're going to come and just bring a lot of machinery and process for the sake of it. And so part of the trick of doing it with a small company is to bring just enough of that for what's appropriate in the company, at the same time recognizing that generally companies that are led by innovation, need to become often more rigorous about making sure that they see that innovation through from the initial idea to the value proposition, but also get to be big enough to deploy that innovation much more broadly. And so my experience has been generally in a young company, there's a bit of and even when I was in a smaller bank, there's a bit of a hive mind where everybody kind of is able to keep informally aware, and the decisions people are making are all pretty well aligned. As the organization grows to be able to service bigger clients and more of them and drive more change, you have to bring enough process in without kind of bringing a template that is kind of a one-size-fits-all template. Kind of understand below kind of the high level of what a process looks like and figure out which are the parts that are germane for a company at state to help it move from a hive mind to that first step of scale where it starts to function enough to be able to leverage and address more resources.
Absolutely. So I always, in startups, and in being a software engineer, we talk about agile. And I always maintain that agile is not a process or a tool, it's a mindset, it's a cultural thing. And I think, agile has to be inculcated in every level of the organization. It was actually interesting that at this stage we were actually realizing as an engineering organization, as a company that is very nimble and agile, that we needed to actually put in bigger struts in this thing to grow this organization to the next levels. Specifically, what are the areas that you've seen around product engineering and operations side that have helped companies scale up?
So on product, I think there comes a point where you have to be a bit more rigorous about understanding your product market fit, right? Generally, what I've seen is a company start and they'll have somebody who is extremely expert in, say, one piece of the marketplace, and this is the case, for instance, with another SaaS type company that I've worked with, but extrapolate kind of to how that could serve a bigger market without doing all of the work on that, and then they're surprised, and so they go through a few iterations. And so kind of becoming more rigorous and trying to bring a harder challenge to exactly what's the fit that makes the innovation work, and therefore the scale, rather than assuming in that the solution can copy apart That's one. With engineering, I find that it's challenging because, like a lot of things in life, I think doing engineering work, 20% gets you 80 of the effort gets you 80% of the way there, and then getting to production ready for the biggest, most critical organizations in the world takes another 80% of the effort. And that's a Pareto that's true in many cases, but it's that kind of driving through from something that works kind of on a bench, in a discrete world to that kind of production ready, and what does it take to help managers get to instill those disciplines, whether it's QA disciplines, whether it's a more rigorous approach to designing the test cases that go into the QA process or whatnot. So those are a couple of examples, and then likewise the business planning. You're committing bigger pieces of capital, and so you need a bit more rigor around what those commitments.
Absolutely.
How they need to be justified.
And it's very clear because, we knew a lot about how to build robust engineering practices. So we brought in things like information security, SOC 2 auditing, scaling up and testing. All of that came out very naturally. But to grow up the organization to provide 24/7 support, measuring SLAs, having case management tool, supportment portal. These were all things that we actually were forced by we were led by our customers, encouraged by our customers to get to that one, and we're starting to see an interesting change in that, and it's also helping us measure the pulse of the customer and pulse of the product at this point in time. The other interesting thing that David brings and is very passionate about is people management. And I always said that as a company, our core values and our core priorities, it was about trust, integrity, and hard work. And our priorities were our employees and our customers come first, our employees and families come second, and the third were our shareholders. So the employees is an important part of that. And then we realized that we are at a stage where we need to grow our team, not just in terms of number of people, but also invest in them and in their skill sets, in their management skill sets, and make them better managers, and so that we can grow. And David is very passionate about that. So David, can you talk very specifically? Let's take one set of people, which is probably middle management, and that's where a lot of the work actually gets done.
Sure.
There's the leadership provides direction and provides strategy, but a lot of the day-to-day heavy lifting is done by the middle management. And can you tell, for our audience, for people who are in engineering, product, and in operations, let's start with engineering, and say, what would you advise somebody who is in that mid-level of their career in engineering, or want to get into that mid-level? What is the transition that you would do from a management perspective?
So there are a couple of things that you could talk to, but I think a lot of times, just first, the middle manager maybe comes to that because the person was performing well in the seat and was asked to get something a bit bigger and hasn't had a lot of training, and there's no end of how you could go down the path of training people with in terms of management tools and setting expectations, setting out plans. But I start from something much simpler generally, which is I think of as a bit more about kind of just the social contract you have with somebody who you're asked to supervise, which is understanding, and I don't mean this to sound transactional, but it's a two-way value proposition. What am I expecting this person to do for my organization, and what is this person expecting the organization is going to do for them? And I usually see that through the lens of for the person, of development. Say, hey, look, you've got a job to do for this, for the organization, for us to deliver our plan for next year. But as part of that, I want to give you the opportunity to grow in some skill such that next year you can deliver a bigger part of the organization and progress your own career. And I think that's the simplest thing. That you tell, if people bear that in mind, then they won't make lots of the mistakes of young growing managers awfully many. They understand that, unlike, say, what I was trained for initially, which was a military service where people are locked in for a while, it makes them very conscious that, you expect people to work hard and to do the tasks they're asked to do, including the tasks that are difficult or not the cool things, but that you're renewing a contract with them about why you entered into this arrangement in the first place. And so for me, that's just a key leadership tenet.
And do you see that across all organizations, whether it's product, engineering, or operations, or do you see any kind of customizations or soft touches that you have to apply depending on the organization?
I think what I would say is that I hope that's a universal rule about just what it's like to become a middle manager. I think that the content of what that value proposition may be varying. Say, a product person, it may be, hey, look, I'm going to have you, present to the internal management team a couple times because we'd like you to get a bit more confidence in your presentation so that you can get some more client exposure, which will let you lead bigger client projects. For somebody in the development organization, it may be, hey, the organization's going to invest in you and send you on a course to learn a new environment because next year we think we're going to change our mode and so on. And so we need you to be able to kind of get to these particular components that are on the plan for this year delivered in a way that carves out enough time for us to give this back to you. So I think I see them more in the tactics of it rather than the philosophy of creating and renewing that proposition.
That is very interesting because, I mean, look, the great resignation that happened after the COVID, I mean, nobody was immune to that, including us. I mean, we had a point when there was no transition at all. We had no turnover, and then there was a little bit of a turnover. It's definitely better than the industry average, but it was it. But when we basically told our middle managers that now it's your responsibility to make sure that not only are you hiring, but you're also not losing the people, and we encouraged them to think in a very empathetic manner, it was a mind shift. And I think, bringing in David and having that firm commitment in investing in the employees and investing in their management skills is certainly, that's an interesting phase of the company that we're going through. So again, thank you again for joining us in our journey, and thank you for attending this. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at the information below. Thank you.